Look around. The defining feature of modern life is friction. We are constantly moving, constantly overwhelmed by a blur of noise and obligation. And when the burnout hits, the reflex is almost universal. We assume that to find any real spiritual depth, we have to abandon the city, quit our careers, and find an isolated mountain peak somewhere. But this tension between worldly duty and spiritual yearning has a historical precedent. Look at this colorized photo of a pharmacy from 1930s India. The man managing a shop much like this one was named Abe Charan De. He was a businessman, a husband, and a father of 3, trying to balance mounting corporate debts with a deep desire for spiritual truth. The answer to Abe's dilemma arrived in the form of a towering spiritual master named Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. Known as the Lion Guru, Bhaktisiddhanta taught something entirely counterintuitive for his time. He completely rejected the idea that a devotee had to retreat into the forest to find God. You can see his doctrine of detached service in action in this archival image of a massive industrial printing press. While traditionalists shunned British technology, Bhaktisiddhanta argued that if everything is God's energy, then nothing should be abandoned. Instead, modern technology, palatial buildings, and wealth should be deliberately weaponized for divine service. Which raises a practical question. How does an exhausted, debt-ridden pharmacist capture the attention of a revolutionary leader overseeing a massive national movement? Abai didn't make a massive financial donation, and he didn't perform any severe ascetic feats to get noticed. He forged his connection through the simplest and perhaps most difficult human act. He simply sat down and he listened. To understand how this works, look at this archival photo showing the sheer density of pilgrim traffic in India. In the autumn of 1932, Bhaktisiddhanta led a month-long pilgrimage through Vrindavana. It was a highly coordinated operation, involving hundreds of tents, a police band, and constant buzzing crowds. Abai traveled from Allahabad to join the camp for a single day. But that evening, instead of going out to see the famous temples with the other pilgrims, he made a distinct choice. He found his way into a small room where the guru was speaking to a dwindling handful of senior monks, and he simply sat in the back, giving his absolute, undivided attention. This diagram illustrates a core Vedic principle known as Shravanam, or hearing. In this tradition, spiritual advancement does not start with speaking or acting. It requires a receptive lower node, the student, forming an unbroken line of attention with the guru. By adopting a submissive posture of listening, the student allows knowledge to descend. As Abai sat in that room for hours, he wasn't debating philosophy. He let his intelligence drink in the words, absorbing the exact transcendental reality his guru was transmitting. In a culture obsessed with doing and saying, Abai's silent, intense focus was the exact mechanism that authorized him to eventually speak with his own authority. The message Abai absorbed was uncompromising. Bhaktisiddhanta was fiercely opposed to anyone who distorted spiritual truths. He routinely dismantled corrupt priests, proving from scripture that spiritual qualification comes from character, not birth. His logic was so sharp and his preaching so effective that local elites actually pooled a 25,000 rupee bribe to fund his assassination. He was equally fearless with political figures. When the prominent Indian nationalist leader seen in this portrait, Subhash Chandra Bose, complained that the guru's followers were doing nothing for the national independence movement, Bhaktisiddhanta bluntly replied that Bose's political propaganda required strong men. His monks were too skinny for politics. They should simply be left alone to eat and chant. Yet behind this fierce public armor was a leader paying close, affectionate attention to his students. Months after the pilgrimage, Abe attended an initiation ceremony in Allahabad. Out of the crowd, Bhaktisiddhanta immediately recognized the young pharmacist. He turned to his senior men and said, "Yes, he likes to hear. He does not go away. I have marked him." That simple recognition yielded immediate results. Bhaktisiddhanta typically required a waiting period between the first and second levels of initiation, but that day he bypassed protocol and granted Abe both initiations at once. The silent listener was now a fully recognized representative. From there, a quiet bond deepened. In a room full of people, the guru would sharply rebuke a wealthy donor who thought his monthly check bought him special privileges. But later, when Abai would offer his respects privately, this commanding intellectual giant would simply reply, "I am your servant." The fierce lion and the gentle servant operated with the exact same goal. The ferocity protected the absolute integrity of the Vedic message, keeping it safe from dilution. The deep affection nurtured the few genuine students who proved willing to receive it. Over the next few years, Abai's life began to move in two opposite directions. His pharmaceutical businesses, despite his intense efforts, began a slow collapse. But as his material stability fractured, his spiritual clarity sharpened, and his writings on Krishna consciousness began to find a serious audience within his guru's mission. In November 1935, Abhay traveled to the serene banks of Radhakunda to see his master, but he found Bhaktisiddhanta deeply distressed. Despite the movement's massive success, senior disciples in Calcutta had started fighting over who would occupy the best rooms in their new marble headquarters. Disgusted by the politics and the desire for prestige, Bhaktisiddhanta pulled Abhay aside. He bypassed the entire institutional hierarchy and delivered an urgent, direct mandate to the struggling businessman. If you ever get money, print books. A year later, just 2 weeks before the guru passed away, Abhay received a final letter. In it, Bhaktisiddhanta laid out a definitive life mission. Abhay was to take these teachings and become an English-speaking preacher, carrying the philosophy far beyond the borders of India. To fulfill that massive order, Abhay would rely on a perspective his guru had spent a lifetime refining. The philosophy was distilled into a single, piercing directive. Don't try to see God, but act in such a way that God sees you. This approach reframes the relationship between the spiritual and the mundane. It suggests that depth isn't found by escaping our environment, but by changing our intent within it. If everything is understood as divine energy, then we can take the exact things causing our friction, our laptops, our careers, our families, and reorient them. Utilizing these daily tools as offerings of service is the exact behavior that invites the gaze of the divine. The path from a struggling pharmacist in Allahabad to a global spiritual teacher was laid in those quiet hours in Vrindavana. It started the moment Abai quieted the noise, stepped into the background, and truly listened.